Imagine for a moment the vast, unforgiving expanse of the North Atlantic. Picture a tiny, desolate island, a speck against the immense power of the ocean. On this island stands a lighthouse, a beacon of hope, a solitary guardian against the treacherous waves. Now, imagine that beacon going dark, not because of a storm, not because of a mechanical failure, but because the men tending it simply vanished. No bodies, no boats, just an empty, eerie silence where life once was. This is the chilling, true story of Eilean Mor. And tonight, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, or rather, what didn't happen, according to the official records. But the sea, my friends, holds its secrets deep. And some secrets, well, some are too terrifying to ever truly be forgotten. This isn't just a tale of disappearance. It's a descent into the unknown, a journey into the heart of fear, where the very air around you seems to hum with an unseen presence. Pay attention to the subtle sounds around you as you listen tonight, because sometimes the most terrifying truths are whispered on the wind or echo in the creaks of an old abandoned place. Join me as we unravel the mystery of Eilean Mor.
My name is Thomas Marshall, and I've spent more than 40 years of my life serving the Northern Lighthouse Board. 40 years. That's a long time to stare out at the endless gray, isn't it? Most people in the city, with their gas lamps and their bustling streets, their noisy trams, they can't fathom the silence of the sea. They can't grasp the kind of solitude that settles in your bones when you're months away from the nearest soul, with nothing but the gulls and the waves for company. I'd worked plenty of stations, from the rugged coast of the Scottish mainland to the exposed rock stacks off the Hebrides. I knew the signs, I knew the men, and I thought I knew the sea. But Eilean Mor was different. It was December of 1900, a harsh winter, even for those parts, the kind of cold that bites right through your thickest wool and numbs your fingertips. I was part of the relief crew, stationed on the Hesperus, heading out to Eilean Mor to relieve the 3 keepers there, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, yes, another Thomas Marshall, a common enough name back then, and Donald McArthur. James Ducat was the principal keeper, a man cut from the same stone as the island itself, gruff, experienced, with a beard as wild as the ocean he watched over. He'd seen it all, so he claimed. He was the kind of man who could stare down a storm and not flinch. His voice was like the rumble of the distant surf. Then there was the other Thomas Marshall, younger than me, with a family back home he spoke of constantly. A good man, dedicated, but you could tell the isolation wore on him more than the others. He missed the laughter of children, the warmth of a hearth. He always carried a worn photograph tucked into his breast pocket, which he'd glance at when he thought no one was looking. He had a nervous habit of tapping his fingers, a quiet, almost inaudible rhythm against whatever surface was near. And finally, Donald McArthur. Now, Donald, he was a different sort altogether. a temporary assistant, a replacement for a keeper who'd taken ill. He had a reputation, Donald did, a hot temper, prone to arguments, and a history of brawling on the mainland. He was known to keep to himself, often seen pacing the lantern room late at night, a dark silhouette against the beam of light. They said he had a haunted look in his eyes, as if he'd seen things out there that no man should. 3 men, alone on a rock, miles from civilization, bound together by duty, but perhaps also by something else, something less tangible, the kind of unspoken tension that can fester in such confined spaces under the constant scrutiny of the boundless, indifferent ocean. Our journey out was rough. The Hesperus, sturdy as she was, bucked and rolled through the swells. The waves crashed against the hull with the force of a battering ram. The sky was the color of bruised plums, and the wind howled like a banshee, tearing at the rigging. You could barely hear yourself think. We were delayed for days by the weather, unable to make a safe landing on Eilean Mor. It felt unnatural, unseasonal. Even the most seasoned sailors on board, men who'd seen 1,000 gales, muttered about the unseasonal ferocity of it all. There was a sense of foreboding, a chill that had nothing to do with the freezing spray. And then, on December 26th, through a brief, furious break in the storm, we finally saw it. The lighthouse, standing tall, proud, and dark, utterly, unnervingly dark.
Our captain, a stern Scot named Harvey, barked orders over the roar of the wind. The dark lighthouse, it was an impossibility. A beacon meant to burn night and day, a constant promise of safety. For it to be out, it meant something was terribly wrong. My gut twisted into a cold knot. It was a feeling I'd only known once before, when I saw a ship go down with all hands. We managed to get a small boat launched, fighting against the monstrous waves. The spray was blinding, stinging our faces like 1,000 needles. As we approached the landing platform, the silence, once we were out of the immediate roar of the Hesperus's engine, was profound. It wasn't the natural silence of the sea. It was an absence, a void. No welcoming wave, no shout of greeting, nothing. Just the mournful cry of gulls and the rhythmic crash of the surf against the rock. We scrambled up the narrow path, slick with spray and lichen. The heavy iron door to the lighthouse was closed, but unlocked. Unlocked. That was the first alarm bell. Keepers never left the door unlocked. It was an unwritten rule, as fundamental as keeping the light burning. I pushed it open slowly. It groaned on its ancient hinges, a sound that echoed unnervingly in the stone shaft. The air inside was still and cold, heavy with the smell of stale lamp oil, and something else, something indefinable, like old fear. We called out, "Ducat? Marshall? McArthur?" Our voices bounced off the stone walls hollow and unanswered. We checked the living quarters first. Everything was in order. Beds made, the lamp for the evening meal, unlit, was on the table. A half-eaten meal, cold, congealed, sat on a plate. But no men. Up we went, spiraling stairs, each step a louder echo in the oppressive quiet. We checked the storeroom. The oil for the lamp was still there, untouched. No signs of struggle, nothing overturned. It was as if they'd simply stepped out. Then we reached the lantern room. The lamp itself was clean, polished, ready to be lit, but it was cold, dead. And the windows, usually gleaming, were grimy with sea salt and spray, obscuring the view. Harvey, his face grim, pointed to a chair near the lamp. On it, neatly folded, were 2 oilskin coats. 2. There were 3 keepers. This meant at least one of them had gone out into the elements without his protective gear. In this weather, it was unthinkable. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a practical joke. This wasn't men simply leaving. This was something else, something far more sinister. It felt like the island itself was holding its breath, waiting for us to uncover its secret. I distinctly remember a sudden sharp rap. We all froze, looking around. Nothing, just the wind whistling faintly through a crack somewhere. My nerves, I told myself, the strain. But the other men looked just as shaken. "Check the landing, the boat cranes," Harvey ordered, his voice strained. We hurried back down, our boots clattering on the stone. The boat cranes, used to hoist supply boats, were still secured. No boats were missing. Their small dinghy, usually kept on the landing platform, was gone. But it was only ever used for short trips around the island for maintenance. It couldn't have survived the storm we had just weathered. As I stood on the rain-swept landing, staring out at the churning gray sea, a profound sense of horror washed over me. It was like the city after a great fire, everything present, yet utterly vacant. What could have happened? What force could have taken 3 grown men, without a trace, from a solid stone lighthouse in the middle of a raging storm? For more terrifying and unexplained true stories just like this one, remember to subscribe to ASMR Mysteries on YouTube. You won't want to miss our next chilling tale. We found the lighthouse logbook. The entries, written in Ducat's precise hand, painted a picture of a steadily deteriorating situation. The initial entries were routine: weather, duties, supply checks, all normal. Then things began to shift. December 12th. Gale force winds all day. Never seen such a storm in 20 years. Marshall is quiet. December 13th. Storm continuing. McArthur quarrelsome. Ducat warned him about his behavior. December 14th. Storm unabated. Wind now hurricane force. Something feels wrong. Even Ducat looks uneasy. We all feel it. This entry, this was the one that truly sent shivers down my spine. Ducat, the stoic, iron-willed keeper, admitting to uneasiness. It was like hearing a mountain confess fear. The entries for the 15th and 16th were even more disturbing. Ducat wrote of voices crying on the wind and a great booming sound from the island's highest point. He even mentioned McArthur, previously described as quarrelsome, was now weeping openly and praying constantly. Thomas Marshall, the other one, was pale and unresponsive. We knew McArthur had a history of trouble, but weeping? And Ducat writing of voices? This wasn't the behavior of experienced, hardened lighthouse keepers. This was the behavior of men on the brink, of men being pushed past what they could bear. The last entry, dated December 15th, was almost illegible, scrawled in a shaky hand. Storm is over. God is over all. December 15th? But the storm, the truly devastating one, had raged for days after that. The Hesperus had been held up until the 26th. What kind of storm was he talking about? And why did he say it was over? As we pored over the log, a sudden, sharp crack echoed from above.
We all jumped, our heads snapping upwards. Dust rained down from the ceiling. A piece of the stone ceiling had simply given way, a small chunk of rock falling to the floor. It was the lighthouse settling, I told myself. Just the lighthouse settling. But the timing felt deliberate. We searched the island for days. Every crevice, every rock pool. The only other strange finding was on the western landing. The landing equipment, usually meticulously secured, was scattered. A heavy iron crate, meant to be lashed down, was overturned, and it was twisted, as if by immense force. My mind raced. Could it have been an enormous wave? A rogue wave so powerful that it washed them off the rock? But even the most colossal wave wouldn't explain the locked door, the unlit lamp, the half-eaten meal, the 2 oilskins left behind. It wouldn't explain the logbook. No, this was something else entirely, something that defied logical explanation. It was as if the island itself had swallowed them whole, and the wind, endlessly circling the lighthouse, seemed to carry a faint, almost imperceptible whisper. I swear, in the deepest silence of those nights, alone in that empty lighthouse, I could feel their presence, a cold breath on my neck, a shuffling sound from the top of the stairs, the feeling of being watched. We replaced the light. We had to. The sea waits for no man. But as the beam cut through the inky blackness, a feeling of utter despair settled over me. We were shining a light into the darkness, but the darkness had already won. The mystery of Eilean Mor, it clung to that rock like the barnacles to its sides. It was palpable, a part of the very stone. And it still is, to this day.
When we finally returned to the mainland, the news spread like wildfire. 3 men vanished without a trace. The newspapers were full of theories: foreign spies, a tragic accident, madness brought on by isolation. But none of it fit. None of it truly explained the haunting emptiness of that lighthouse. I was interviewed, of course, repeatedly. I told them what I saw, what I felt, the cold, the silence, the logbook. They nodded, they wrote, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. They wanted a simple explanation, a practical one. They wanted to blame the sea or human error. But I knew it was something more. The official inquiry concluded that the men were likely washed away by a rogue wave, a convenient explanation, one that allowed the world to sleep soundly at night. But what about the log? What about the locked door? What about the 2 oilskins? Those questions, they remained unanswered. They still do. Years later, I tried to make sense of it. I'd seen a lot in my life at sea, a lot of strange phenomena. But this felt ancient, primal, as if the island itself had awakened, roused by the incessant light, by the intrusion of human presence. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls around my own cottage here on the mainland, I hear it. Not the familiar sound of the sea, but something else. A faint, low moan, like a ship's foghorn, but somehow distorted, human. And I think of MacArthur weeping, of Ducat writing of voices. I think of the other Thomas Marshall tapping his fingers, probably longing for his family. They were not just lost to the sea. They were taken. By what?
I cannot say. But the terror they felt in those final moments, it's etched into the very stone of Eilean Mor. Sometimes, when the moon is full and the tide is low, they say you can still see the light of Eilean Mor flicker, just for a moment. Not the steady, comforting beam, but a frantic, desperate pulse. A last, dying gasp from those who were taken, a warning to those who dared to venture too close to the edge of the known. Because the sea, my friends, holds secrets that even the brightest light cannot penetrate. And some islands are best left to their silent, ancient mysteries, for the price of unraveling them might be more than any human soul can bear. And that, my friends, is the true, chilling story of Eilean Mor. A story that continues to echo in the dark, relentless whisper of the waves. A story without an end, only an absence, a void. Good night, and may your own lights always stay lit.